The airplane trembled as turbulence shook the overhead bins, but the real storm wasn't outside. It was in row 27. There a man in a faded hoodie sat crammed into a narrow economy seat, his little girl curled against him, clutching a stuffed rabbit with ears worn from love. To the passengers around him, he was just another broke single dad, his shoes scuffed, his face lined with exhaustion, his lullaby to his frightened child drawing quiet chuckles and judgmental whispers. They sneered, rolled their eyes, and whispered about how a man like him could even afford a ticket, some muttering that people like him didn't belong among them. Yet within minutes, their laughter would be replaced by stunned silence, because the man they mocked was far more than he appeared, and when the intercom crackled and the crew's posture changed, the word that slipped from the flight attendant's lips would flip the entire cabin upside down. "Sir." Emily, the little girl with messy blonde curls, trembled as the plane jolted again. "Daddy, I'm scared," she whispered, her rabbit squeezed tight against her chest. Her father, Daniel Hayes, kissed her forehead softly. "I've got you, sweetheart. Remember what we said, brave like the rabbit." But the passengers around them weren't listening with compassion. They were listening to mock. The woman in pearls ahead muttered about people from economy who shouldn't be flying at all, while her husband chuckled about Daniel probably spending his last dime on a ticket. A young man across the aisle even pulled out his phone, recording Daniel as though he was some kind of joke for social media. Daniel heard it all, but his calloused hands only tightened on the armrest. He wasn't there for their approval. He was there because his daughter had begged to see the ocean for the first time. That was all that mattered. But fate had a way of peeling back masks, and soon those passengers would see the man beneath the hoodie. The lights flickered, the plane jolted again, and nervous gasps spread like wildfire. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm but tense. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a minor systems issue. Please remain calm." Yet calm was the last thing anyone felt. Passengers gripped their armrests, whispers turned to panicked murmurs, and fear rippled across the cabin. But in row 27, Daniel did not panic. He straightened in his seat, scanning the cabin with sharp, steady eyes that suddenly made him seem like an entirely different man. Emily buried her face in his chest, but his gaze stayed forward, assessing, calm in a way that unsettled those around him. Then the unexpected happened. A flight attendant rushed down the aisle, speaking urgently into her radio before freezing when her eyes landed on Daniel. Her posture changed instantly, her voice sharp and professional. She saluted ever so slightly and said a single word with unmistakable respect. "Sir, we may need your guidance." And just like that, every head turned. The man they had ridiculed now commanded the room without saying a word. Daniel gently placed the rabbit in Emily's lap. "Hold this for me. Remember, it's brave, just like you," he whispered before rising from his seat. As he stepped into the aisle, whispers erupted. "Protocol? Who is he? Military? What's going on?" The crew stood straighter, voices shifting into formality. At the cockpit door, the captain turned, his face flooding with relief. "Major Hayes," he said quietly. "Didn't know you were on board." Gasps rippled through the cabin. "Major." The title hit like a thunderclap. Daniel hadn't heard it in years, not since leaving the Air Force after 15 years of flying missions most people could never imagine. To the world, he was just a weary single dad. To this crew, he was still Major Hayes, the man who had once coordinated emergency landings under fire. Calmly, Daniel asked for the situation. The captain explained the fault, the danger if it spread, and the panic creeping among passengers. Daniel didn't hesitate. "I'll calm the cabin. Give me updates every 5 minutes." "Yes, sir," the captain replied instantly. The balance of authority had shifted, and everyone knew it. Walking back down the aisle, Daniel carried an aura that silenced even the most restless passengers. He stopped midway, his voice steady, strong, unshakable. "Ladies and gentlemen, everything is under control. The crew is following protocol, and I'm here to ensure your safety. So breathe, hold your loved ones close. Panic helps no one." His tone left no room for argument. The crying toddler in the back quieted. The man in the expensive suit who had mocked him earlier dropped his gaze. Even the young passenger who had recorded him stuffed his phone away in shame. Daniel sat back beside Emily, his calmness now radiating through the cabin. When she asked, "Are we okay?" he smiled gently. "Yes, but let's do something kind while everyone's scared." He pointed toward a young boy across the aisle, sobbing into his video game console. "Why don't you share Brave Rabbit with him for a while?" At first, Emily hesitated. Her rabbit was precious, but then she stood and placed it in the boy's lap. His tears slowed. His mother mouthed a tearful "thank you." In that moment, Daniel and Emily's kindness rippled across the plane, softening even the hardest hearts. The fear that had gripped the cabin minutes earlier began to transform, not into laughter, not into comfort, but into respect. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, realizing how cruel their earlier judgment had been. The young man who had mocked Daniel earlier whispered, "Sorry, sir, for before." Daniel only nodded, never seeking validation, never gloating. His focus remained on what mattered, safety. Soon, a flight attendant returned with news. "Sir, the captain says the system has stabilized. He thanks you for being here." Relief washed through the passengers. Emily, watching the boy with Brave Rabbit finally smiling, felt her own fear dissolve. Apologies began trickling through the cabin. Even the woman in pearls, her voice trembling with regret, admitted, "I was wrong. I judged you. I thought you didn't belong here." Daniel looked at her steadily and replied, "Everyone belongs here, remember that." His words carried weight no lecture could. For the first time, the passengers didn't see him as a man in worn boots. They saw him for who he truly was. As the plane prepared for descent, the atmosphere was unlike any other landing. Gone was the usual chatter, the rush for bags, the noise. Instead, a heavy silence of respect hung in the air. When the wheels touched down, the entire flight crew broke protocol, walking together down the aisle to row 27. They stood tall, squared their shoulders, and in unison said, "Thank you, sir." Passengers gasped, some clapped, but even applause couldn't capture the reverence of that moment. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, Major Hayes served this country for over 15 years. Many of the safety protocols we follow today exist because of men like him. His presence today was no accident, it was providence." The truth was out. Emily blinked, eyes wide. "Daddy, you used to fly airplanes too?" Daniel chuckled softly. "Something like that, sweetheart." Yet even as the crowd watched him with awe, he wasn't looking for their admiration. He only looked at Emily, tightening his arm around her. To him, she was the only reason he ever needed to be brave. When the cabin finally emptied, passengers paused to apologize, to thank him, to admit their shame. Daniel responded with calm, never bitterness. To one man, he simply said, "Be better to the next person you see who looks like me. That'll mean more than an apology." At the gate, he bent down to Emily and whispered, "See, Brave Rabbit helped more than just you today." She grinned, her missing tooth showing, proud of her father. Together, they walked into the terminal, just a dad and his daughter again. To most, they looked ordinary. But to every soul on that plane, they would never look ordinary again. Because Daniel Hayes had reminded them that true strength isn't in uniforms, medals, or titles. It's in how you carry yourself when the world underestimates you. And while the passengers left with newfound respect, Emily left with the greatest truth of all. To her, he was Major Hayes. He was Dad. And that was the only title he ever truly needed. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because sometimes the most ordinary people carry the most extraordinary stories, and you won't want to miss the next one.